Before jumping back into our reading and study of Jude's letter, I want to do an aside about gospel promises. Gospel simply means good news, and author and counselor Steve Cuss points out that all gospels have a promise and a path. A promise and a path. A promise, that's what you'll get, and a path, that's what you have to do in order to get whatever is promised. And Steve points out that the promise is usually one or more of the following. It's freedom or autonomy, right? The ability to do what you want to do. Peace or love, feeling that and knowing that you are loved. Now, consider the following gospels. The American dream is a gospel. Its promise is something like this, that you can become anything you want to become, or you can be wealthier than the previous generation and live with a certain level of autonomy. And the path is work hard, right? That's what you have to do in order to get the promise, or perhaps maybe that's shifting now, and the path might be demand your rights. I'm not sure. But that's the American dream, the promise and the path. Chronic anxiety is a gospel. It promises peace. And the path, well, you just have to keep thinking harder and harder about the things that are going on in life and worry more. But if you do that, you'll be able to figure out all the stuff that's going on. You'll be able to anticipate every future problem and dilemma. And then if you can do all that, you'll be prepared. And if you're prepared, you'll have peace. It's the promise and path of the gospel of chronic anxiety. The secret knowledge gospel is another one that's out there. It's been around, I think, since the Garden of Eden. And the promise here is a certain level of status and a certain level of maybe power or control, right? And the path is you've got to discover and leverage the truth that we common folk just don't have, or maybe it's available to us, but we're too dumb to use and leverage or whatever. But there's a secret knowledge gospel, and it has a promise and a path. The prosperity gospel, talked about and addressed by New Testament writers. The prosperity gospel basically promises health and wealth, right? And the path that you have to take, well, you give God everything you have, and God will give you everything that you've dreamed of. That's the prosperity gospel. Jude, in his letter, addresses what I would call the promiscuity gospel. It's taught by these apostates that he is warning us about. And the promise that they're offering is life without moral restrictions or guilty feelings. They might say it this way: you can have it all, right? The freedom to do what feels good plus Jesus, right? You can get away with it. Jude says these people have turned the grace of God into an excuse for sensuality, right? The path will claim your enlightened status. That's the path. You claim that you know, and you've got some spiritual insight that allows you to realize that you can get away with it. You can have it all. That's the promiscuity gospel. And then, of course, there's Jesus' gospel. Jesus' gospel also has a promise and a path. The promise is eternal life, an unshakable relationship with Jesus plus kingdom citizenship. Right? We get to enjoy grace and glad obedience now, a daily experience of life with Jesus now, and then glorification in heaven later, right? Or I could say it this way: Jesus and grace now, Jesus and glorification later. That's the promise, the path. Admit that you are unqualified and always will be unqualified to have a relationship with God, but trust Jesus' offer that God has done what is necessary to make a relationship possible. Then die to self, follow, and worship Jesus. Now, as I ran down through that very quick listing of gospels with their promised payouts, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that some of those gospels aren't true. They are false promises made by false teachers, and there isn't the promised payout with a false gospel. It doesn't deliver in the end. Another observation, this one by Steve Cuss, is that in every belief system except for Christianity, a human pays and the God benefits. But in Christianity, the God pays and the human benefits. So it's helpful for us as Christians to recognize, number one, that we can be Jesus followers and yet still be very interested in, maybe even believing and pursuing a false gospel. Like we can believe two gospels at once and be giving our lives to two separate gospels, competing gospels. And so it's helpful for us from time to time to stop, pause, look at our life, maybe even have someone else look at our life, and just try to answer honestly these questions. What promise am I pursuing? And what is the path to get that promised thing? And who is paying? I hope that's as helpful to you as it has been to me. Changing gears, I enjoy hearing about how couples met. It's not that I am secretly a screenwriter for Hallmark movies. Yeah, right? I just find their stories of how couples met that be full of fascinating details, and it's intriguing how God brings people together. For example, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a couple in our church that met at kickboxing class. I mean, that's just truly astounding. Although I'm not going to lie, when I first found that out, I was like, man, I hope they never get in a fight with each other, right? I know a couple, they're not in our church, where the guy got to know the girl by putting super glue on his hand and then shaking her hand. They knew each other ahead of time, but she didn't want to give him the time of day. And finally one day, yeah, he put the super glue on his hand and got her to shake his hand. And they were stuck together for half an hour while somebody was trying to use some chemicals to get that super glue peeled apart in their hands, separated again. And by the way, I know what you're all wondering. Did it work? Yeah, it did work. Eventually, they did fall in love and they got married. Which leads to another thing I often enjoy, just finding out, I ask couples sometimes, who fell in love first? Because that often leads to some interesting stories, how, the one was, recognizing the other and maybe the other wouldn't give him the time of day and all of that. It's just interesting stuff. Another type of story that I really enjoy hearing is about how individuals became Jesus followers. And again, it's because there's such fascinating details and there's evidence of God's power in bringing people to himself. By the way, this is one of the reasons that we do videos of salvation stories before baptism. In the old days, we just had people come down to the tank and we would just ask you a few questions and ask you to share your story then. And I found that a lot of times people were really nervous because it's such a big thing being in front of people and stuff like that. And so the stories they shared were not the stories that they had shared with me privately when we talked about this before. I remember one time in particular, it was awful. The guy had a great story of how God had convinced this man that he needed a relationship with Jesus Christ. And it was an amazing story of how God intervened on his life. And we got him down there in the baptismal tank, and we were going to do the baptism. And he got asked, so, tell us your story. How did you become a follower of Jesus Christ? When and where that happened? And he just stumbled. He was all nervous. He couldn't even think straight. And he just said, I've been a Christian all my life. Maybe I was born a Christian. I'm like, what? No, that's not what you said before. And so we do videos now. It helps people be a lot more clear in the story of what really, really happened. Also, secretly, I keep those videos, and from time to time when I'm just a little bit discouraged, I go back and I watch your baptism videos and I'm reminded this is why I do what I do. But imagine this, whether it was your baptism video or I just had an opportunity to sit down with you over a cup of coffee and I was kind of asking you and interviewing you, how did you get here? I mean, how did you end up being a Jesus follower? You would tell me a story, and probably at some point in your story you would tell me that you made a choice. Right, you made a choice to trust Jesus, to put your hope in Jesus. Maybe you would use other verbiage like I invited Jesus into my heart, or I asked him into my heart, or something like that. And then I could ask you after hearing your story, so who fell in love first? Was it you with Jesus or Jesus with you? And the Bible answers that one for us pretty clearly, right in 1 John, we love him because he loved us first. And so I could say to you something like this. After hearing your story, you made a choice because God loved you first and you were called. Let's go back to Jude's letter, verse 1. Jude, a servant of Jesus Christ and a brother of James, to those who are the called, loved by God the Father and kept for Jesus Christ. Man, you see in this short verse that God calls, God loves, and God keeps. And this is where we're going to concentrate today. God calls. More than invited generally, we are called. It's not like God did put out a general invitation. Matthew 11, 28 to 30 tells us that. But there's something more here. Jude says we were called. Romans chapter 8, verse 29, for those he foreknew, this is all about God, for those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that they would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. So you and I, we made a choice. I believe Romans is teaching, or Paul is teaching in this letter to Romans, and Jude is teaching in the letter that we're reading and studying together, that we made a choice because we were called. And it was an amazing call. I would go so far as to say we were called effectively. You saw that in Romans 8. Paul says, the ones that God foreknew, he predestined, and those he predestined, he called. And then it doesn't say, and then some of them were justified and some were glorified. No, it says those that he called, they were justified and glorified. It happened. It's like what he started, he finished. It went all the way from beginning to end. Foreknew, predestined, called, justified, glorified. So we were called, not just invited, but called, and called effectively, called in such a way that we heard the voice of God, we heard the offer, the invitation, the calling of God, and we responded positively. Some would say we were called convincingly. Now, I realize that not everybody believes this way. I have brothers and sisters in the Lord, great Christians who take a different stance on this, but I just want to say I believe in this thing called the effective calling of Jesus. Because I think Jesus taught it, Paul taught it, Jude taught it. But I also believe in this effective calling of Jesus because I believe in the complete foolishness of humanity. All of us are dumb enough to ignore God's invitation. Technically, we're spiritually dead, not just foolish. But all of us are foolish enough or dead enough to ignore God's invitation. And so God has to do something very, very special. And I think that special thing is calling us effectively. Let's go back to Jude 1. To those who are the called, loved by God the Father, and kept for Jesus Christ. We're going to look at the grammar for just a moment. I need to tell you, I've studied a fair amount of grammar. You can't learn another language without studying the grammar, but I am not a grammar nerd. The stuff I'm about to share with you, I had to look up. Called is a verbal adjective. A verbal adjective is an adjective that describes a noun, but its description involves action, a verb. So, for example, annoying brother, right? Annoying is an adjective because it's describing your brother. Certainly not my brother. My brothers are great, right? It's describing your brother, but the thing that's describing, that description involves an action. Your brother is annoying you frequently, so he is an annoying brother. That's a verbal adjective. So called is a verbal adjective. And the noun that it describes is you and me, the recipients of Jude's letter, right? So you, or the recipients of this letter that Jude wrote, that's the noun. Called describes these people. In the CSB, it's translated to those who are the called, right? So we are the called ones, you could put it that way. We are loved and kept, or protected, and those words are participles that describe the called. But they're not just participles that describe called. They are perfect participles. And that's just a grammar tool for indicating something that's been done and is done once and is done for all time. So loved and kept are the reasons that we can be confident that we won't fall away, but instead will one day stand in God's presence with great joy and without blemish. So if we wanted, you could kind of paraphrase this introduction to Jude's letter this way. You, called people, you are now and forever loved and kept by God. And I'm going to talk to you about people among you who are self-deceived and deceiving others. We'll call them apostates. And I'm going to appeal to you to do something about this problem. But before I do that, I just want you to know that you are 100% secure in God. I think that's the message of this opening phrase in Jude's letter. So we were called. Second, we are loved. That's awesome to think about. We're not just tolerated. We're not even liked, just liked. We are loved. We are loved by God the Father. We are loved, and we are loved even when we are not lovely, even when we sin. This week I was meditating on Psalm 103. Let me just read a few verses for you that were kind of special to me this week. Psalm 103, beginning at verse 1. Praise the Lord, my soul. All my inmost being, praise his holy name. Praise the Lord, my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives your sins and heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit and crowns you with love and compassion, who satisfies your desires with good things so that your youth is renewed like eagles. Verse 10, he does not treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him, for he knows how we're formed. He remembers that we are dust. We are loved, not just tolerated. And we are loved even when we are unlovely, but we are not indulged or spoiled, allowed to get away with horrible behavior. We are loved. God loves us so much that he will challenge our dysfunctions, our wrong beliefs, and our bad behavior. But third, we're kept. We're kept. We are kept for something, and we are kept from something. First, the from. We're kept from falling away, and we are kept for Jesus and our future with him. That's verse 24, talks about that. Now, a few times in the past when I've been trying to help, especially a younger person, come to grips with this idea of that we are kept by God. We are secure in God. I've used a little illustration. It's not a perfect one, but it's been helpful. And I might try it when I deliver this message on Sunday at our in-person service. I might invite a youngster up on the stage, and we might try this. Hopefully it'll work and he won't ruin my illustration. But this is what I sometimes do. I'll take a piece of paper and I'll say, this paper is going to represent you. And I might even write you on there, draw a little stick figure, smiley there on there. And I say, all right, so this paper represents you. And I take the paper and I kind of fold it over. And I say, all right, the paper represents you. And my hand is going to represent God's hand. And you, when I put you in my hand, it's like I'm putting you, it's like you being in God's hand. And then I'll invite this young man or this young girl to try to pry open my hand and get the paper out. And so far, now I'm getting older, so it may not work on Sunday, we'll find out. But so far, I've never had anybody be able to do that. And sometimes I even let them use both hands, and they're prying and they're pulling and, and trying to get, but the point that I'm trying to make is just like this paper is completely secure in my hand and there's no getting it out. You can't get it out of there. You are secure in God's hand. That's part of the message that Jude is giving to us. We are loved, but we are also kept. So we follow Jude's advice for protecting ourselves and our community from apostasy. Yeah, we do that. But then we rest in God's character and we rest in God's power. God will not only keep us from falling, but he'll even perfect us. He will prepare us for life in heaven, and we are kept, and nothing can take us out of his hand. Now, time for another aside. What about those who wander from the faith? Those who made a profession. They said at some point in time, I'm a Jesus follower. And there was some evidence for a while that was genuine, but they're not following Jesus' ways anymore. They're not involved in helping Jesus' priorities get done here on earth like they are in heaven. What about those who wander from the faith? I want to tread very lightly here, because this is a really tough subject, and again, there are good Christians who are going to disagree with what I'm about to say, but here's what I would say. I believe Jesus and the apostles taught that we are kept and no one can take away our salvation. That's number one. And number two, Jesus and the apostles taught that the truly saved persevere. They hang on to their faith and they make it to the end. That doesn't mean there are no times of deconstruction, as we talked about in part 2 of this series, but it does mean that they persevere. Somehow they maintain some faith and keep it to the end. Now, I believe that as we look at what Jesus taught and the apostles taught, assurance is given to those who are concerned that they can lose their salvation. I think there's several verses in the scriptures that teach it clearly, that if you're concerned that you could lose your salvation, just know you can't. And it's not because you're amazing, it's because God's character is one of faithfulness and God's power is infinite. So I think there's assurance being given throughout the scriptures to those who are concerned that they could lose their salvation. But I don't find verses that give assurance to those who are not concerned about losing their salvation. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that those who wander from the faith are not saved or were never saved. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I don't find verses like the ones that maybe I would love to have, like some teaching by Paul where it says, listen, as long as you know that you heard them confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you saw some evidence of that for a period of time, then rest assured that they are indeed saved and they will be in heaven with you someday. I wish maybe that there was a verse like that, but I've never found one like that. And I think it's because if that was true, even if it's true, that those people have in no way either lost their salvation or were never truly saved. That's knowledge that you and I couldn't be trusted with. I don't think. I think it would let us go the wrong way, and it would make it so we are not concerned about those who are falling away, right? We wouldn't be doing what Jude taught and we talked about in part 2 of this series about, after we've got our oxygen mask on, trying to help others get theirs on. Jude was so clear and so picturesque in the language, so graphic really in the language he used about snatching others from the fire and having mercy on them and pulling them back. And I don't think we would do that if there was such a verse that said, as long as you can remember a time, then they're good or whatever. So recap, assurance is given to those who are concerned that they could lose their salvation, but I don't think any assurance is given to those who are not concerned that they could lose their salvation. So we believers, we don't trust or rest in our memory of someone's conversion story. Instead, we follow Jude's advice, right? We, Jesus followers, try to rescue everyone who is not currently walking and talking like a Jesus follower, regardless of whether they made a profession at one point in time. We follow Jude's advice from verses 22 and 23. So back to you. Were you called? Were you called? If yes, you are loved and kept. Have you responded affirmatively to his call? Was there a point in time when you recognized the call of God or the offer of Jesus and you said yes? If yes, keep yourself in God's love, but know that you are kept safe in God's hand. If no, if you've not yet responded affirmatively to his call, today is a great day to say yes, yes. That would be absolutely awesome. And if you want somebody to talk to you about that, I would be very happy to do that. Pastor Joel would be very happy to do that. You just send us an email or just call us, get a hold of us. We would be happy to talk you through that. The basics are as follows. Admit that you're unqualified for a relationship with Jesus Christ, and you always will be. But second, trust Jesus' offer. Jesus was telling the truth when he said that he made it possible through his death on the cross to deal with your sin problem and set you right with God. Then after trusting Jesus' offer, be prepared to die to yourself, follow and worship Jesus, knowing that you are loved, kept safe in God's hand.